Hello, Washington football fans, and welcome to another edition of the Washington Wrap, a 10-minute single-issue show where the whole format is about really setting ourselves a time limit and trying to wrap up one issue in 10 minutes into a nice, tight little package as best we can. Normally I have co-hosts, but this week's episode is a little bit different. Now that we are finally here at the regular season for the 2021 NFL season, I want to take a moment and give myself a 10-minute time limit to try to do this, to really wrap up what happened in the offseason for the Washington football team. And when I say wrap it up, I'm going to try to cover off all the big stories. So if you didn't pay super close attention, from December through to September this year about what was going on with Washington football, and that's understandable, there was a lot going on in the world with the pandemic and everything else, this is going to be a crash course to bring you up to speed to hopefully get you ready for Washington football 2021. So I'm going to start the clock. I'm going to set myself 10 minutes. We're not going to go into a great level of detail for most of these headlines, but let's see how we go. So, 10 minutes, starting now. And I'm going to be reading these because obviously there's a lot to cover, so bear with me. So the team hired Marty Mayhew as the general manager, who was previously the Detroit Lions general manager from 2008 to 2015, before he had a couple of stints with the Giants and 49ers. They also hired Marty Heineke as the executive vice president of football for player personnel, which is a mouthful of a job title. Not bad for someone, by the way, who got their start in football as a beat writer for the Washington Times, covering the Redskins in the 1980s. So a bit of a homecoming for Marty Heineke. He was previously with Carolina and has a connection to Ron Rivera. That's why he got hired here. But with the hiring of Marty Mayhew as well, the Washington football team actually became the first team in NFL history with a non-white team president, general manager, and head coach all at the same time. So that's nice for Washington. Along that same line, Jennifer King, who you will all remember was a full-year coaching intern for Washington in 2020, well, she was appointed on a full-time basis as the assistant running backs coach. So she becomes the first black female coach in NFL history. So another first for Washington and the NFL. Ryan Kerrigan, the all-time sacks leader for Washington football, was not offered a new contract with Washington, unfortunately, and signed with our NFC East Division rivals, Philadelphia, on a one-year deal. I think most Washington fans probably will join me in saying we wish him success for at least 16 of the 18 weeks of the 2021 NFL season. We signed quarterback Taylor Heineke to a 2-year, $8.75 million contract in February this year, following his impressive run to end the season with us last year. We released it was a bit messy, but the point is Alex Smith left the Washington football team in March this year and announced his retirement a bit after that. We then signed Ryan Fitzpatrick to a 1-year, $12 million deal in March as well. So Fitzmagic, obviously, this is probably one thing every Washington football fan has seen. I don't need to tell you this, but Fitzmagic for Washington under Ron Rivera in 2021 is our quarterback. We signed a few key free agents. We signed cornerback William Jackson III to a 3-year, $42 million deal, and he looks like he'll be our starting number one cornerback this year. We signed wide receiver Adam Humphries in March as well. He looks like he'll be a starter alongside Terry McLaurin and another free agent wide receiver that we signed, and this was the big one, Curtis Samuel from Carolina on a 3-year, $35 million deal. And although he hasn't really been healthy in the offseason, we didn't see him in preseason, we didn't see a lot of him in training camp, I know a lot of Washington football fans are excited to see what Curtis Samuel brings to this offense. We signed defensive lineman Jonathan Allen, to a long-term extension in July. That one came out of nowhere when the news dropped. It was looking like we weren't going to get him to re-sign before the season started, but that deal got done, which is a big relief for all concerned. And Jonathan Allen has said he wants to retire here in Washington. Remember, he's a local. He grew up in the area. We didn't re-sign other local right tackle Morgan Moses. We didn't offer him a new contract, and he ended up signing with the New York Jets. So Morgan Moses now playing out of Meadowlands. We signed free agent left tackle Charles Leno out of Chicago. He's expected to be our week 1 starter at that left tackle anchor position, and he's looked good in preseason and training camp. Reports from that have been good. That's an upgrade on that position, especially based on what we had last year. So Charles Leno looks like the best player we've had at that position since Trent Williams left, and that's important. Speaking of the offensive line, we traded back for Eric Flowers. So you'll all remember he played himself back into form with Washington in 2019 after Things didn't go great for him his first few years in the league. He played for us in 2019, played great, signed a deal with the Miami Dolphins for 2020, missed some time in 2020 with COVID, but then we traded back for him for a sixth round pick, or a late round pick swap as well. Brandon Scherf, a long-term deal could not be negotiated with Brandon Scherf, and he is playing on the franchise tag again for 2021. For him, that roughly equates to about $18 million for this year. Going into the offseason after this season, the two biggest questions are going to be who's our future quarterback, and also can we re-sign Brandon Scherf. I hope those are our two biggest questions going into this offseason at least. The draft obviously happened, and I'm not going to go through every draft pick, but we used our first round pick by selecting linebacker Jamin Davis with the 19th pick in the first round. He didn't play a lot during preseason, and when he was on the field, we weren't using exciting packages. It was base schemes and simple formations and stuff. So excited to see what he can do come week one against the Los Angeles Chargers. We signed, and this one was interesting, we signed Chilean from Chile, tight end Sammy Reyes, who was likely to hit the NFL's International Pathway Program, where we've seen a few players come through this year, including one on the defensive line for Washington, David Barter. But we pounced before he actually got to that program and signed him as a undrafted free agent rookie, essentially. He made the final 53-man roster, and although he's very raw, he is physically extremely gifted. And if he can really develop into a strong tight end, the sky's the limit for him. So he made the final 53-man roster. Excited to see what Sammy Reyes can do. Long snapper and fan favorite Nick Sunberg, who had been the longest tenured Washington player, was not re-signed by the team. His contract expired. He was not re-signed. And instead, they drafted long snapper Cameron Cheeseman from Michigan in the 6th round. So a change at the long snapper position for Washington. We signed former Miami Dolphins safety Bobby McCain to a one-year deal, and the safety position is going to be interesting this year. Landon Collins is obviously coming back from injury, pretty significant injury, and has looked good in training camp and preseason and everything like that. So Landon Collins, hopefully, back to his peak Pro Bowl self, because we haven't really seen him hit that ceiling since he came back to Washington from New York, but we know he has that ability, so that'll be really good. And I know Jack Del Rio and the defensive team are excited to see what Landon Collins can do. But Bobby McCain signed to a one-year deal just to provide some depth and some more options at the safety position. Getting into some off-field stuff, it's been a pretty big off-season in that respect as well. Less fun to talk about, but still important going into this season. And if you somehow missed some of this, it's important to have this context. So the year-long investigation that was independently run by workplace lawyer Beth Wilkinson was concluded in July 2021. No report was ever made public, and in fact, if you believe the reports, there was no formal report written. It was she delivered her findings verbally in person. She found that several incidences of sexual harassment, bullying, and intimidation were commonplace throughout the Washington organization under Dan Snyder's ownership. Now, that resulted in the NFL fining Dan Snyder $10 million in response, and Dan Snyder voluntarily stepped down from running the team's day-to-day operations for an undetermined period. So there's no time limit. We don't know if that could end today. Like maybe that was just for the offseason. Once the regular season starts, that'll end. We don't know. There's no clarity. There's no transparency around that. But as a part of that process, he elevated his wife, Tanya Snyder, to CEO. She's now the chief executive officer for the Washington football team. And she's been a lot more visible, a lot more available to media, to fans than Dan Snyder has been for the past few years. So in training camp in Richmond, she was addressing the crowd. There was a PA system and microphone, and she was addressing the crowd. She was having that sort of interaction. So that's a new angle for the team. It'll be interesting to see if that's maintained throughout the season. Speaking of the Snyder family, Dan and Tanya Snyder purchased complete control of the Washington football team after buying out the minority owners for more than $800 million. They had to borrow money to do that, and the other owners across the NFL had to give them permission to borrow money to do that. But that was unanimously passed, and now they own 100% of the team. So depending on how you feel about the Snyders, yay or maybe not. And then the last two items with a minute and a half to go. After a slow start, and it looked quite ugly there for a while, we were languishing towards the bottom of the league apparently, but after a slow start, head coach Ron Rivera announced that the players and staff have eclipsed over 90% in terms of the vaccinations against COVID-19. So the players, the coaches, etc., over 90% now going to this season vaccinated, which is great. You know, I'm not going to go into whether or not you should be vaccinated or not. You should be. But in terms of a competitive advantage, if you're vaccinated, you don't need to miss anywhere near as much time if you're deemed a close contact to a positive case or anything like that. And also it does reduce your chances of actually becoming infected. And then lastly, but not least, Troy Apke. Wonder Bread, for those who remember the Deshazer Everett and Troy Apke conversations we had on this podcast a couple of years ago. He made the roster, and he's actually converted from safety to cornerback. So he's actually officially the first white cornerback to make a 53-man roster in the NFL since like 2002. Now, I know this was a little bit unpopular. Some people don't think he can play football, which is ridiculous. Obviously, nobody makes a 53-man roster if they can't play football. But he is crucial on special teams. He and Deshazer Everett really anchors on that special team unit. Both offer different things, but also both being converted, you know, cornerbacks and safeties and everything like that offer versatility and depth at that position as well for the defensive backs coach, Chris Harris. That's it. 10 minutes. We've wrapped it up. That's the Washington football team off-season in a nutshell. Obviously, we didn't get into any of the name change stuff there. I assume that's probably the one story that most fans have stayed abreast of. As of recording this, you know, what's the date today? It is September 8th, Wednesday, September 8th. If we're led to believe the stories are accurate, the team has a final list of 3 names they've whittled it down to. They haven't announced what those names are. I think it's safe to say Washington football team as a name will be in that final 3, and I think it's extremely likely that Red Wolves will be in that final 3 just because that's by far the most popular name, at least on social media. At this time, I don't feel confident in saying it will be Red Wolves, though. So we'll see what it is. That leaves only one spot in that final 3, which, if it's not Red Wolves and it's not Washington football team, which I don't think it will be, that whatever that other name is in the final 3 will probably be the name. I've seen some people say Commanders. I've seen some people say Brigade or Armada. I think Commanders might end up being it, but that's it. So look, I hope you enjoyed this. I hope this was interesting for you guys. I hope this was a good crash course. As I said, we didn't cover every single headline and topic that was pertinent for the Washington football team over the past 9.5 months of off-season. But this was the big stuff. This was the big ticket stuff that you feel like you should be able to at least have some knowledge of going into the 2021 season. You can get me on Twitter. You can see it here in a moment. Where is it? There. At ChadwickOTWW. There it is. You can also find the Washington Wrap everywhere just by searching for the Washington Wrap. So on Apple Podcasts, or if you listen on Google Play or Spotify or Stitcher, just search the Washington Wrap. You'll find us. Please subscribe or leave a review or a rating if you're listening to this as an audio-only podcast. If you're watching this on YouTube, please like and subscribe. Share the video. Post it on Twitter. Post it on Facebook. Post it on MySpace if you're still on MySpace. But the point is, everywhere you can find us, you just need to find us by searching the Washington Wrap. Facebook and Instagram, we're also there. We're going to be back with another episode in either 1 or 2 days' time, previewing Game 1 against the Los Angeles Chargers. I can't wait. It's going to be so good, even though it involves a 3 a.m. Monday start for me. I'm so excited to watch Washington football again. Thanks for coming along with us with this journey. This was a lot of fun, and we'll see you next time.